Okay, so, when we think about entrepreneurship, it's easy to picture, right? Someone going it alone, building a business completely from scratch, that classic startup story.
Yeah.
But in today's world, with work changing so rapidly, it makes you wonder, is that entrepreneurial spirit, that drive to create and solve problems, is that something everyone needs now? Not just people starting companies.
It really does feel like a core skill that's becoming more and more essential.
Definitely. And we've got some fascinating sources to dig into today that really get at that idea.
Yeah.
Like one thing they explore is this whole concept of capital, but not just money, right? It's about the different kinds of advantages we each have, like our knowledge and skills, who we know, our networks, even our reputation.
Right. And it's interesting because if you look at programs designed to help students, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, a lot of the focus has been on building social capital, those connections, and cultural capital, those skills you need to get a job, be a good employee. All that makes sense.
It does, but what we see in the NESBA USA abstract is that there hasn't been as much emphasis on economic capital, the actual money it takes to start a business and become a job creator.
Yeah, and that gap seems to be especially big for people from underserved communities and even just students who are majoring in entrepreneurship.
It's almost like we're training people to start businesses, but not giving them the tools to actually make it happen.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of accessing economic capital becomes so crucial because we're talking about individuals, often aspiring entrepreneurs, who face these huge hurdles when it comes to getting the financial backing they need to actually launch their ideas and create opportunities for themselves.
And that's where NESBA USA steps in, right? This pilot program is designed to tackle that very problem head on.
Right. They're providing not just the kind of curriculum and mentorship you'd expect, but the really crucial element of economic capital, that initial funding alongside networking opportunities to connect with others in their field, all specifically tailored to the needs of underserved communities.
Yeah, the goal is really to make business ownership a real pathway to financial independence and upwards mobility for people who might not otherwise see it as a possibility.
And it's fascinating how targeted they are in their approach. They're not just casting a wide net. They're specifically seeking out individuals who might have been traditionally excluded from these kinds of programs,
Right.
with a particular focus on Black, African American, and Native American indigenous students, which aligns really well, I think, with CSUS's broader commitment to inclusivity.
Yeah,
CSUF is a Hispanic serving institution,
right.
which means they have a large Hispanic student population, and part of their mission is to serve that population's needs. So it fits in with their commitment to diversity and creating an anti-racist community.
Totally. So to get a bigger picture of what's happening with entrepreneurship across the country, we're also looking at data from the Kauffman Foundation. They track how well early stage entrepreneurship is doing using four key measures: the rate of new
Yep.
entrepreneurs, whether people are starting businesses out of opportunity or necessity, they call that opportunity share,
Uh-huh.
how many jobs new startups are creating, and their survival rate, all really important indicators.
Yeah, it gives us a data-driven look at the overall trends and how different groups are engaging with entrepreneurship nationwide.
Now, for our final source, the Entrepreneurial Mindset Imperative, they propose a really interesting shift in how we think about entrepreneurship itself. It's not just about starting a company anymore. It's becoming a way of thinking, a mindset focused on creating value for others, no matter what you do.
Right, and that's a key point because it means that developing these entrepreneurial skills is becoming more and more relevant for everyone,
Yeah.
regardless of when they ever start a business.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to understand the challenges and the opportunities in supporting entrepreneurship, especially for those who haven't had equal access. We want to unpack what it means to cultivate this entrepreneurial mindset in today's world. Let's start with that fundamental need for economic capital. The NESBA USA abstract is very clear. Their focus is on providing that economic capital, the money, the resources directly to students and aspiring entrepreneurs from underprivileged communities. It's not just about advice or training. It's about giving them the financial means to take action.
Yeah, and they highlight that even entrepreneurship majors themselves need this economic capital because their whole focus is on creating new ventures.
It's almost a contradiction, right? You're teaching people to create businesses, but not necessarily equipping them with the very thing they need to get started.
It is, and NESBA USA is trying to address this significant gap, particularly for those from underserved communities who might not have personal savings or access to traditional funding sources.
It's like we talked about earlier with Bourdieu's different types of capital. Economic capital can be the key to leveraging social and cultural capital into real economic outcomes. And that's especially true for underserved communities.
Absolutely. And if you look at the bigger picture, NESBA USA is trying to break down barriers and promote social justice within the entrepreneurial landscape. Their abstract specifically mentions the challenges first-generation college students and those from underserved groups face when trying to get good jobs based only on their academic credentials.
It's like trying to create a level playing field.
Yeah.
And FBA USA is trying to do that by addressing that lack of equal access to money. They're not giving handouts. They're trying to make the environment more inclusive so talent from every background has a shot.
And what's really interesting is their focus on individuals who may have been overlooked or didn't have access to traditional programs. It recognizes that great ideas can come from anywhere, but the opportunity and resources often aren't there.
And their commitment to reaching out to Black African American and Native American Indigenous students really underscores that social justice mission. It's not just about more entrepreneurs. It's about making sure entrepreneurship is a real path for groups that have faced systemic disadvantages.
Right. And as we talked about earlier, this aligns perfectly with CSUF's goals as a Hispanic serving institution. They want to create a welcoming and diverse environment and fight against racism and bias. NESBA USA is putting those principles into action.
So we see this focused effort to address inequality at a local level. Now, let's zoom out and look at national trends in entrepreneurship using the Kaufman indicators. In 2020, the rate of new entrepreneurs in the U.S. was 0.38% of adults. What does that tell us about new business activity?
So that means about 380 out of every 100,000 adults started a new business each month in 2020. And what's interesting, and maybe a little surprising given the economic climate at the time, is that the Kaufman report shows this rate actually increased for both men and women and across different racial and ethnic groups, immigrants, different age groups. So despite the challenges of that year, more people were taking the leap.
That is surprising considering how uncertain things were back then. Were there any differences in those trends among specific groups?
Yeah, over the period they've been tracking it, the rate has typically been highest among Latinos and lowest among African Americans. But in 2020, both of those groups saw big jumps in their rates. Also, immigrants consistently have a higher rate than people born in the U.S. And maybe most surprisingly, the highest rate overall was among people with less than a high school education, which suggests that for some entrepreneurship might be a more attractive path when traditional job options are limited.
That's a really interesting point about education level. Speaking of which, let's move on to the next Kaufman indicator, opportunity share. This looks at the why behind new businesses, right?
Exactly. It measures the percentage of people who started a business because they saw a market opportunity versus those who did it out of necessity, like maybe they lost their job or couldn't find other work.
Okay.
A high opportunity share usually means the economy is doing well and people are starting businesses because they're excited about their ideas.
So what happened to opportunity, Jay, in 2020, given everything that was going on?
Well, unfortunately, it dropped sharply across the board. It had been going up in previous years, but 2020 reversed that trend. The Kaufman report attributes this to the pandemic's impact. As businesses shut down and people's spending habits changed, a lot of people probably started businesses out of need rather than just seeing a great opportunity.
Right. So it makes sense that the rate of new businesses went up at the same time opportunity share went down because more people were probably starting businesses just to survive.
That's the likely scenario.
What about the other Kaufman indicators, startup early job creation and the survival rate of those businesses?
So in 2020, the startup job creation rate was 5 jobs for every 1,000 people.
Okay.
Which is higher than it was after the 2008 recession, but still lower than before the recession. So there's some concern that job creation from new businesses might be slowing down.
And of course, the big question is how many of these new businesses actually survived that turbulent year?
The survival rate in 2020 was 78.1%, which is down from the previous year. It's the first drop since the Great Recession. This probably reflects how difficult things were for new businesses in the early stages of the pandemic.
Right. Makes sense.
The report also mentions the KEYS index. It combines all 4 of those indicators into one score to give an overall picture of early-stage entrepreneurial activity.
Okay.
And in 2020, it was negative, meaning overall activity was below the average of the past 20 years. So despite more businesses, starting the overall health of new ventures wasn't as strong as in previous years. This highlights how important it is to support these businesses so they can grow, especially those started out of necessity.
So the Kaufman data paints a complex picture. More people were starting businesses probably because of the pandemic, but many were doing it out of necessity, and they faced tougher odds of surviving and creating jobs compared to before the pandemic.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we need to do more than just encourage people to start businesses. We need to help them succeed in the long term, especially those who are starting from a disadvantaged position.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about this evolving definition of entrepreneurship and the idea of an entrepreneurial mindset. The entrepreneurial mindset imperative defines entrepreneurship as the self-directed pursuit of opportunities to create value for others. What's important about this definition?
It goes beyond the traditional idea of starting a business and focuses on actively looking for and pursuing opportunities to create value, whether that's financial, social, or cultural. And it can happen anywhere, not just in a startup.
So it's not just for aspiring founders.
Exactly. The source lists all these benefits of thinking this way, like increased motivation, engagement, curiosity, creativity, better critical thinking, more effective collaboration, even resilience and well-being.
Those are good things for anyone to have, no matter what they do.
Right. And the source argues that in today's rapidly changing world, this kind of thinking is almost a necessity. Things like increasing automation and the gig economy mean that being adaptable, taking initiative, and focusing on creating value are crucial for navigating the future of work.
And the fact that 40% of U.S. workers are now in non-standard work arrangements really shows how much things are changing. The old model of a long-term, full-time job isn't the norm for a lot of people anymore.
Right. And this entrepreneurial mindset isn't something you're born with. The source says it's teachable. These skills and attitudes can be developed through education and experience.
Which brings us to our education systems. A few of our sources talk about needing to shift away from rote learning and standardized tests.
Yeah, the entrepreneurial mindset imperative and the Barrington High School incubator paper both point out that focusing too much on standardized tests can actually stifle creativity, innovation, and those entrepreneurial skills that are so important. The Barrington paper even mentions a decline in creativity among young people that's happened alongside efforts to raise test scores.
It's almost like we're working against ourselves, trying to prepare students for the future, but using methods that hold them back.
And this is a global issue. The OECD recognizes entrepreneurship education as a key driver of societal change and developing human capital. And the UN recommends including it in education systems worldwide.
So there's a growing awareness of the importance of fostering this entrepreneurial spirit early on.
Yeah, but as the entrepreneurial mindset imperative points out, a lot of current entrepreneurship initiatives are still focused on starting businesses.
Right.
They might be missing people who don't see themselves as founders, but could still benefit from thinking like an entrepreneur.
And the Barrington High School paper makes an interesting point that students from privileged backgrounds who have very structured lives might actually be missing out on the unstructured time and opportunities for risk-taking that can help develop an entrepreneurial mindset.
It's a good point. Sometimes the very things meant to help students succeed academically might limit their development of curiosity, problem-solving skills, and resilience.
And the entrepreneurial mindset imperative even touches on government support for entrepreneurship, suggesting that some initiative might not be aligned with what entrepreneurs really need.
Which makes programs like NESBA USA even more important. They're filling a critical gap by providing economic capital and support specifically to underserved communities. They're addressing a need that broader efforts might miss.
So to sum up, we've seen how important economic capital is alongside social and cultural capital, especially for entrepreneurs from underserved communities. We need to create a more equitable playing field. The Kaufman data showed us the bigger trends in U.S. entrepreneurship and how events like the pandemic can have a huge impact. And we explored this broader definition of entrepreneurship as a mindset that can benefit everyone in today's world.
Programs like NESBA USA are on the cutting edge of empowering a new generation of entrepreneurs from backgrounds that have often been excluded. Their work is so crucial to creating a more inclusive, dynamic, and prosperous economy.
Definitely. So here's a final thought for you to consider. We've seen that entrepreneurial activity went up in 2020, but opportunity share went down, and there's a growing emphasis on an entrepreneurial mindset for everyone. So what's the best way to support opportunity-driven entrepreneurship for everyone in the years ahead? What role can education and community initiative play in closing the gap between people's aspirations and their access to the resources and mindsets they need?
Yeah, that's a big question.
It is, and we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
Yeah, some things to think about.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time.
See you then.